So there's actually two
Mhm.
different legal questions in the AI copyright infringement domain. One is it copyright infringement to just train on a book, to use, or whatever material, art, to use content for training without having licensed it for that purpose? Is that fair use or is that copyright infringement?
Mhm.
The second one is if your generator post training, like your model exists now, and then it generates something that is copyright infringing, like it, for example, word for word replicates New York Times articles, like in the
Mhm.
OpenAI lawsuit from the New York Times, or generates something that looks basically exactly like Bugs Bunny or
Or
Mario
Mickey
or
Mouse,
whatever,
yeah,
Mickey
yeah.
Mouse, like like these Midjourney ones do. Is that infringement? I mean, I think
Mm.
that one is clearer in the sense that like it's clearly infringement when it does that, because
Mhm.
that's what that is. The question that's more interesting on the generation side is whose fault is that? Is
Yeah.
that the AI company's fault for creating a model that could generate infringing content, or is it the person who prompted it for infringing content and then used it somewhere in a way that infringed?
Yeah, because the thing is that, like, it's not illegal to draw Mickey Mouse.
I think a lot of the way that AI companies want to talk about it is like, okay, yeah, like you could create infringing content with our product, but you could create infringing content with Photoshop if you wanted to.
Right,
Like,
right.
that's not our fault. You should, as the user, be making sure that your content is not infringing before you use it in
Yeah.
any way that could be that.
I kind of agree with that, really, because
Yeah,
it's
and I
like
think that makes some sense, but it
Mhm.
becomes tricky in things like when you're not talking about Mickey Mouse, when you're talking about
Right.
some obscure artist who, yes, this generation like replicated their art almost exactly, or this character almost exactly, but the
Yeah.
person who generated it is not going to recognize it.
Mhm.
Like they
Yeah,
didn't do it
yeah.
deliberately, but the AI spit out something that was basically an exact replica.
Right, yeah, and
So,
that's why for me, I feel it is more on the training side. Let's say this person does really, really great pictures of, like, mountainscapes, and somebody prompts the AI model to give me a mountainscape, and it looks exactly like that person's art. At that point in time, it is the fault of the model, and it is the fault of your training data because there's no intentionality on the part of the person who is doing the prompting. It's all because you decided to use this person's art to train your
yeah.
model without any kind of compensation.
AI company counter argument to that would be that that's a matter of guardrails on the generation side, and
Eh,
that you should be making sure your thing doesn't generate anything that exactly replicates things that are in its training data, and that you can do stuff like that, like build your Mickey Mouse detector in or whatever, such that it doesn't do that, or more generally have some fingerprinting of the exact things that are in your training data, and don't and check to make sure that anything doesn't too closely match that. The argument is you can train on stuff, and then as long as
Mhm.
you make sure that the model does not regurgitate it, basically, the training part is still fine from a copyright infringement perspective. And that's sort of the argument that seems to be mostly supported by the rulings that we've seen so far, which
Yeah.
is that just training by itself is not copyright infringement. And I
Mm.
think that's probably where it's going to land, because that's kind of what
Yeah.
most of the relevant precedent looks like. The Google Books ruling was the biggest one that's relevant here, I think. I don't know if you know what that one is.
I think I've heard about it, yeah.
Google Books, Google can search books. They basically were scanning and indexing print books such that you could
Mhm.
go search them. And so they did have the entire copies of all of these books just searchable in Google,
Yeah.
but they were not displaying the full copies of the books to anyone at any point. They were only
Mhm.
displaying like the small excerpts that
Excerpts, yeah.
matched your search queries. And so that was definitely ruled as fair use. So it doesn't matter
Mhm.
that Google does have the entire copies of these books, um, because they're using it for a useful purpose and they're only showing segments of it to people,
Mhm.
then that's fine. So that was ruled as fine. And like you can make the AI analogy there pretty directly, which is like
Yeah.
if they can train on the whole copies of the books, and as long as they're not outputting more than two sentences or without like
Mhm.
citations or whatever, which you could do on the generation side with guardrails, then it's
Yeah.
fine. Like the training part is not the legal issue.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's where I feel like we need actual, like, we need actual legislation to kinda come in and maybe
yeah, I think
even that
that's
playing field a bit.
yeah, I think that's true. and I don't know what that legislation looks like, if it's just saying that's
Yeah.
actually copyright infringement or not. I don't know if that's the best approach or not, because there's a lot of fair use questions about, like, okay, if you've ruled stuff like that is not fair use, that kills a lot of other non-AI related things that do similar
Mhm.
things. Like, there was actually a post from someone at the Internet Archive being like,
Yeah.
let's be careful about pushing for everything being copyright infringement, guys.
Yeah, because that does. Yeah, no, it's
So
I like, yeah,
yeah.
it's just so it's such a sticky mired thing, but also it's like it's good at least that there is like suits coming against the AI companies, especially that this is coming from companies that have a bit of heft behind them and
Mhm.
you know are willing to fight that legal battle.